Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Microsoft Today podcast. Today's podcast was recorded on Tuesday, February 26th, 2019, titled Spiral Out, Keep Going. Today's podcast is a bonus podcast. As I mentioned in the previous podcast from earlier this week, we've passed 5,000 followers on Twitter. Thank you so much again, guys. So as a thank you to you all, and for being such great fans and being such great listeners, and being interactive on Twitter, I've decided to make two special bonus podcast episodes this week. And they're not going to be about technology, which I think is kind of important. Hopefully they just give you a little bit more insight into myself and kind of like my ideas for this podcast and why I've decided to do it and why I format it the way I do. And then maybe we can spur some conversation. These won't be too long, maybe 15 or 20 minutes each. But hopefully we can spur some conversation and I can get some feedback from you guys. And we're just going to kind of kick it off and see where it goes. I really don't have a whole lot of notes on this one because it's more personal, but I will be publishing show notes, and so I'll have information on the show notes there, but we'll discuss it as we go through. So the title of today's podcast is Spiral Out, Keep Going. And if you're a listener to the podcast and you make it all the way through the podcast each week, which I know can be tough because I ramble on and I can be boring sometimes, but basically I've begun to end every podcast with thanking you all as listeners and then saying spiral out, keep going. And the reason I use the word spiral out, keep going is kind of just personal to me. It's some kind of a personal mantra I've had for many years. And I've had some of you reach out to me asking why I say that. And so I think there's 5 or 6 of you that have reached out. And so thank you for being inquisitive and wondering about what that was. Whenever I started saying it, I didn't really think very much about maybe you guys having questions about it. But I'm happy to answer it because I think it's just a good insight into who I am and then like my perspective on everything we're doing with this podcast. So Spiral Out, Keep Going is actually lyrics. It's lyrics from a song called Lateralus. Lateralus. From the album Lateralus by the band Tool. Tool is a rock band that's been around for many, many years. I'm sure many of you have heard of them at least some point. They've been around for nearly 30 years now, I think. Their lead singer is Maynard James Keenan. They're like a deep thinking, like always pushing the envelope. It takes them 10 years to come out with an album type band. If you're not into hard rock, I completely understand. I'm really not that into hard rock as well, but Tool always really struck a chord with me just because their level of intelligence. They try to do more than just like make a rock song. There's like meaning behind what they do. And they have like real psychedelic art. And, you know, one of the other co-founders is a CGI and a special effects, like a makeup artist and things like that. And so they fell in line with like the things I cared about whenever I was a teenager, and I've kind of grown up with them. And so their album Lateralus came out in, I believe, 2001. And this song just really hit me because it's more about personal growth, basically. It's a song about personal growth, but the album itself is actually brilliantly put together. Because it's built upon the Fibonacci sequence. And the song is actually written in a time code that's like similar to the Fibonacci sequence. They didn't follow it exactly, but they did their best. And if you don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is, the Fibonacci sequence, which was named after Leonardo of Pisa, is a series of numbers where after the 2 starting values, each number is the sum of the 2 previous numbers. So the start of the Fibonacci sequence is 1 and 1. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. And then you go 1 plus 2, and so 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then you go 2 plus 3 equals 5, and then 3 plus 5 equals 8, and then 5 plus 8 equals 13, and on and on and on and on and on. And the Fibonacci sequence is interesting because it's a part of the golden ratio. So the golden ratio is 1.618. 1.618 is the golden ratio that's found throughout nature. So there's plants that utilize the 1.618. Basically all kinds of natural phenomenon that grow and or work within this golden ratio. And that's actually made its way into modern society as well. Designers and architects and engineers have found that the golden ratio of 1.618 is actually the perfect ratio for many, many aspects. And so a lot of the architecture you see today, or the way things are designed from, you know, desks to chairs to all kinds of other things, follow that golden ratio, 1.618. And I could get down in the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence and go down a big rabbit hole on that, but I'll leave that in the show notes and you can go down that rabbit hole if you'd like, because I could talk about it forever. Because I actually wanted to be an engineer, and so when I was in high school in the mid to late 90s, I took engineer courses. I became an engineer's assistant right out of high school. I was going to school for engineering. I did CAD and all kinds of other stuff, and I still do things like play around with SolidWorks and do 3D printing and CAD. I've never left the engineering part of me out. But Y2K came along song, and that's how I got involved with IT. Was I got a job while I was in college upgrading computers for Y2K, making a lot more money than would ever have gotten had I stayed in school. And so that's how that's just a long, another convoluted conversation about that. So the golden ratio has always meant something to me, because when I was going through 4 years of CAD classes, we always talked about the golden ratio. And so whenever this album came out in 2001, it just kind of struck a chord with me, and Lateralus kind of struck a chord with me because of the Fibonacci ties. And so that's just kind of how this came about, and how I came across this song, and how I came across that mantra of spiral out, keep going. And for the song and the album, in short, basically what it means is always question what you see and continue to expand your knowledge each day by spiraling out, like the Fibonacci spiral. As I've said, I've made that kind of my daily mantra for years, and I try to encourage others to do the same. So regardless of what you're passionate about, I hope that you become the best that you can be and never settle for mediocrity. And I equate that mindset of never settling for mediocrity to go hand in hand with innovation. And that's why I love technology so much, is I am never done learning. I am never finished improving. I am always in development, right? So I'm just another product iteration every single day, and that's just the way I look at it. My life is a Scrum board each and every day. My calendar is my Scrum, right? So I'm checking up each and every day. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And when I finish the day, is what I did today, has it improved my life, or has it improved the lives of those around me? If yes, then check mark successful day. If not, ban. I really need to buckle down and try harder tomorrow. And so that's kind of how this Fibonacci sequence and this whole Lateralus thing and the spiral out, keep going, that's what it means to me. As you know, in the show notes, I'm going to leave links to all of this, and so you can listen to the song and you can understand the Fibonacci sequence, Fibonacci spiral, if that's what you want to do. But just some cool things about the song that I think it's cool to share is, like I said, the time signature of the main riff is 988, which is the 16th step of the Fibonacci sequence. And then to start the song off, the lyrics are sung by syllable count in the Fibonacci sequence. And so he's just, the way he sings is in the Fibonacci sequence. It's just really, really cool. How do you write that? I don't know. Just, again, brilliant people. And then the lyrics in the song start at 1.618 minutes into the song, which again is the golden ratio. And so I've been talking about the song for so long just because I like the song, but my point is, even for the point of this podcast, like I'm always constantly learning, but even as I constantly learned, I was getting into my comfort zone. And that's why I started this podcast, because it's just really easy to get into your comfort zone and just saying, hey, I learned this today, or hey, I learned that today. But it's really great whenever you learn and interact with other people that can hold you accountable. And not so much like, hey, I can't believe you didn't do that, but hey, this is what I learned today. What did you learn today? And if you don't have something cool to show, or something cool to say, or something, interesting, it just kind of motivates you to get off your butt and do a little more, right? And so that's the main reason I did this, was more, I don't want to sound selfish, but I know what I was learning was cool, and I know everything I was talking about was cool, because it's Microsoft, it's technology, it's innovation. But, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around here, it doesn't make a sound. If I learn about all these new technologies and all this great stuff, and I don't have anybody to discuss it with, am I really getting the most out of what I learned? And I don't think you do. And then so that's the whole point of trying to create a community and learn off of each other, and to just, like I said in the previous podcast, and Microsoft kind of said the same sort of thing, is like, we all need to push each other forward. And whether it's Microsoft pushing their customers forward, who then push them forward, and back and forth and back and forth, that's fine. That's what innovation is, and that's what this podcast is about, and that's what hopefully we're all trying to improve our lives and improve our world every single day in the little ways we can. With that said, I have another aspect of my life that it's a struggle I have every day, and as I talk to people in the technology world, I think a lot of people with the same mindset as me also struggle with it. So I just think the mindset fits within the technology world, because it's always changing and always innovating, and that's people with ADHD and or attention problems. I have severe ADHD. I grew up with it my entire life. I was never medicated, but it got out of hand whenever I was in my mid-20s, and so I had to start making adjustments to my life to adjust to it. And I still struggle with it every day. And the thing I struggle with is focusing on things that matter and that I can control. And so I actually have a Venn diagram that I print up on top of my desk. And I don't remember where I got it. I've had it for 10 plus years probably. And there's two circles. One circle on the left says things that matter. One circle on the right says things you can control. And then the little tiny sliver overlap in the middle is things what you should focus on. And it points straight at it. And that's a really tough struggle for me, because I want to know it all. I want to know all the cool technology and stuff that Microsoft's working on. And not just Microsoft, but everybody. I want to know it all, but I don't have the time. Right? There's not enough hours in the day. And then I also want to change things and make this world a better place, but I can't do that by myself. So that's why, again, starting the podcast, I can't do it by myself. So, hey, I'm going to focus on what I can control. I can say, this is what I'm doing. I'm preparing my life by learning computer science, or I'm preparing my life by learning about new technologies like Power Apps or Power BI, or the Power Platform as a whole, or Microsoft Flow and automation, to prepare for that automation AI takeover that's coming at some point. And the funny thing is, the struggle I have with focusing on what matters actually ties back to that song Lateralus. One of the lines in the song is, overthinking, overanalyzing separates the body from the mind, withering my intuition, leaving opportunities behind. So basically what they're saying within this is, don't get lost in the weeds, stay focused. I think this has a lot to do with mankind, right? We get caught up in the mundane. We care about things that we probably shouldn't care about. If we came together as a species and as a people of Earth, who knows what we'd be able to accomplish. In an effort to push myself forward, I'm making myself accountable by putting out my thoughts to you guys, who can come back to me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, all those other places, like, hey Brad, where was that thing you promised us? Or what was that thing we were going to talk about, And so I'm going to post that Venn diagram, because I have no doubt there's a lot of you in the IT world who have many of the same struggles that I have had, or I continue to have. We all just love technology so much that it's like the dog from the movie Up, right? It's like, squirrel! So we just can't wait for the newest and latest and greatest. I have a really bad habit of getting 90% into something, and then, like, instead of finishing the last 10%, I'll jump onto the new and next best thing. That's why I've kind of in my career I've been a jack of all trades and a master of none. How I've decided to pivot and focus more now, and so I'm less of a jack of all trades, and I'm trying to be a master of some, so not a master of everything, but like a master of some. And so I'm focusing on things like Power Platform, Flow, Power Apps, Power BI, machine learning, going down that road. And so that's how I've decided to do it. I just hope that maybe if there's even just one of you out there that this helps, and helps you understand that you're not alone, that it is a struggle every day to stay focused in our short attention span world. And I fear for our children and the children's children, because I think it's just going to get tougher. Just as technology continues to innovate, we must continue to keep pace with the technology, but then also we must keep pace with the world around us that is just seemingly going faster and faster and faster, right? But I think if we come together, which hopefully we are doing with this community from the podcast and the technology community as a whole, and Microsoft empowering people to do this as well, that we can come together and overcome these obstacles that we're going to face over the next 20 or 30 years as innovation and AI take over. And so hopefully we all learn from each other, and we can continue to move on and continue to spiral out and keep going. And it really has been a tremendous blessing for me with this podcast, because I'm continuing to do the things I've always done, but now the interaction just elevates everything I'm doing, because you guys are a part of it. You're helping shape it. And so thank you so very much for tuning in. I hope this bonus podcast was meaningful and useful to some of you. I don't think it'll probably be meaningful and useful to everyone. We're not always going to agree on how we should approach life, and that's okay. But it's cool to put the dialogue out there, and maybe we can all learn from each other from that perspective as well. How did you take this? How do you enjoy this? Let me know at MSFT Today on Twitter, or at Brad Grew on Twitter, or contact at msft.today for email, or the contact form on the website. However you choose to contact me, I'd love to hear from you. All right, guys, sorry if that episode felt like it was a little bit deeper than an episode of 21 Jump Street, but I just wanted to, share a little bit more insight about myself, and I think some people may enjoy that. If not, oh well, I know my mom's listening. Hi, Mom! And so before I end the show, I do have some thanks. We have a new patron. That's right, someone backed us on Patreon this week, and I wanted to drop them a thank you. And that patron is Brian Bernard. He backed us at the Windows XP level, and we'd really appreciate it if you show Brian some kudos on Twitter at Barnyard Tech, at BarnyardTech on Twitter. So thank you very much, Brian Bernard. He is a former senior program manager at Microsoft, and his interests include cloud, big data, machine learning, and AI. So he's probably a good follow. So make sure you follow him at Barnyard Tech on Twitter. And for those that don't know, Patreon is how you can back us monetarily to help us with the podcast. As I said in the previous podcast, I'm hoping to hire a full-time editor, but to do that, I'm going to need some help from you guys. The full-time editor should help me produce far more content, and I want the content to go beyond just the podcast. I have a ton of training videos and training series I want to try to create. And again, I'm going to release all of those for free. But to have the time to do that, I need some help, mainly in the editing space. So anytime you listen to a podcast, for every 1 minute I'm recording, there's probably 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 minutes of editing. Because I try to edit this down as tightly and as concisely as possible, so there's no dead air, because your time's important to you, and I don't want to make the podcast longer than it really needs to be. You can back us on Patreon at patreon.com/msfttoday. And on Patreon, we have tiers, and the tiers are named after versions of Windows, and each one has different rewards, and it starts with the $3 tier, which is the Windows 95 tier. And then we move up to the Windows XP tier, then the Windows 7 tier, then the Windows 10 tier, then the Windows Server tier, then the Windows as a Service tier. So there's plenty of tiers to choose from. And I think we came up with some pretty good rewards on there, including a commercial-free podcast. All backers get access to a commercial-free podcast. And so there's the pre-roll and post-roll ads that show up. They're auto-injected by my podcast host. You get a commercial-free experience. You also get access to the MSFT Today Show OneNote, plus a bunch of other stuff. The important thing is, to get a full-time editor, I need 40 or 50 backers on Patreon. And that's my goal, and I'm going to continue to ask until I get those 40 or 50 backers. Whatever happens after that, I don't really care about. I just like creating content, and I like sharing it with you all, and I want to focus on creating content and not editing. Editing sucks. I hate it so very much. And so God bless the editors out there. I don't know how you do it. We're looking to get 50 patrons is our goal for hiring an editor. So check out patreon.com/MSFT today if you would like to back us on Patreon. And I give everyone a shout out on Twitter and everybody a shout out on the podcast who backs us on Patreon. And you get t-shirts and mugs and mouse pads and that kind of stuff. So please, if you enjoy this show and you'd like to hear more of it, please check out patreon.com/MSFT today. And if you don't want to back us on Patreon, that's all right as well. We still welcome you. I just ask two things of our listeners. Please, if you like this podcast, tell one person who you think might like it about the podcast and have them subscribe. And also, if you listen to this podcast on an Apple or iOS device, please follow, subscribe, and rate this podcast on iTunes. For whatever reason, iTunes takes ratings really, really seriously, more than they do listens. So the more ratings we have, the more people that will see this podcast within their search results. I'd like to get on the first page of just the Microsoft search results. A lot of the podcasts on iTunes are old Microsoft podcasts, so Microsoft corporate podcasts that are no longer updated. And so I'd like to at least get past those. And so we're trying to get more and more ratings on iTunes. And whenever you do leave a rating on iTunes, if you actually leave your name, I'll read that. We have 7 ratings so far on iTunes, so thank you to everyone who's rated, but only 3 of them have actually written. And we actually received a new review just yesterday, and so thank you, Windows Fan 95, for your review. I really do appreciate it. And you'll always be Windows Fan 95 Plus in my book. Anybody out there remember Windows 95 Plus? It was basically a collection of wallpapers and other visual improvements to Windows 95. I remember I was so stoked whenever I got that. Now looking back, I was like, we actually had to buy a CD for that. How about anybody out there who installed Windows 95 via floppy disk? I did that once. I think it was like 24 floppies. Ridiculous. I still have MS-DOS 6.22 on floppy. Aw, yeah. Try not to be impressed, ladies. All right, guys, that's enough. Hopefully you like this bonus podcast. I do have one more bonus podcast in store for you guys this week. I just want to say February 28th is my mother's birthday. So hi, Mom. I know my mom listens to every one of my podcasts. So thanks, Mom. I'll see you at dinner on your birthday. Until next time, guys, make sure to follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/MSFT today. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at MSFT today. You can follow us on YouTube as well. We upload all of our podcasts to YouTube, and that's where we'll be uploading a lot of the training videos and things that I've been talking about. I actually have one that's going to be really cool about creating a website on GitHub. So follow us on YouTube if you haven't already. Ooh, and I almost forgot. Don't forget to check the show notes. Have a lot of information in the show notes as well. msft.today/podcast. Or if you're a fan of Medium, you can snag all of our show notes at medium.com/MSFT today. And until next time, don't forget to spiral out. Keep going.
From Milan,